What if I told you that the one thing you're always searching for is actually the reason you fail? I'm talking about motivation, that incredible electric feeling when you start something new, the rush of a brilliant idea. You feel unstoppable. You tell yourself, this time is different. But what happens a week later when the work gets boring and the excitement fades? That powerful motivation vanishes and you're left with another half-finished project, feeling like a failure. You're not lazy, you're not broken. You've just been using the wrong fuel. In the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you a simple story about a young craftsman and an old impossible task. This story holds the secret to unlocking a power inside you that is far more reliable than motivation. It's a quiet force that doesn't fade, and it's the only thing that guarantees you will finish what you start. Stay with me, because the lesson he learned might just be the one you've been waiting for. Eli was a stonemason. He had inherited a small workshop from his father, a man who had been one of the most respected craftsmen in the entire region. The workshop was filled with the smell of wet clay and stone dust, the constant tap-tap-tap of hammer against chisel, and the cool, rough texture of unfinished marble waiting to be shaped. Eli was talented, very talented. He understood how stone could be transformed, how patience and precision could turn a rough block into something beautiful. But Eli was impatient. He was bored by the simple everyday work of the shop, repairing old garden walls, carving simple headstones, fixing broken steps. He felt this work was beneath him. In his mind, Eli was an artist, a visionary. His sketchbook was filled with grand sculptures that had never been seen before, towering statues with flowing robes, intricate fountains with dancing water, monuments that would make people stop and stare. These ideas were his passion. He would work on them for hours, fueled by a rush of creative energy. But the moment he hit a difficult problem, a curve he couldn't get right, a detail too complex to execute, his excitement would vanish. He'd get frustrated and push the project aside, waiting for a new, even more exciting idea to strike him. Because of this, his workshop was failing. He was so busy chasing the next brilliant idea that he neglected the real work that paid the bills. A layer of dust settled on the counters, and the loyal customers of his father's day slowly stopped coming. The silence in the shop was growing louder than the sound of the chisel. One morning, a wealthy old merchant entered the shop. He placed a faded scroll on the workbench. "I want to commission something my family has dreamed of for generations," the merchant said, his voice quiet but firm. "A memorial fountain. It must have 12 pillars, each carved with a different virtue. Patience, courage, wisdom, honesty, all of them." He unrolled the scroll, revealing an intricate design, far more complex than anything Eli had ever attempted. "My grandfather drew this 50 years ago," the merchant continued. "He took it to a dozen stonemasons, and they all said it was beyond them. They said only your father could have done it." The old man looked at Eli, his eyes searching. "They say you have his talent. I will pay you enough money to save this workshop if you can complete it." A flash of excitement, of motivation, shot through Eli. This was not a boring repair job. This was a challenge, a legendary project that no one else could do. This was a chance to prove he was a genius. "I'll do it," Eli said confidently, his mind already racing. For the first few days, Eli was consumed by the fountain. He worked with a fiery passion, carefully sketching, measuring, selecting the perfect stones. It was thrilling. But then the real work began. Each pillar required hundreds of careful chisel strokes. To carve even one virtue symbol took days of painstaking precision. Every angle had to be perfect. Every curve had to flow. It was slow. It was tedious. It was profoundly boring. After a week of this meticulous work, Eli's motivation was completely gone. He stared at the barely started first pillar and felt nothing but a rising tide of frustration. His mind started to wander back to his exciting new sculpture designs, projects that felt fresh and inspiring. "This is a waste of time," he thought. "I could be creating something new, something brilliant." One afternoon, in a fit of anger, he accidentally knocked a tray of chisels onto the floor. As he got on his hands and knees to pick them up, a wave of despair washed over him. He felt like a failure. He decided he would call the merchant in the morning and tell him the fountain was impossible. That night, unable to sleep, he was cleaning out his father's old, dusty desk, ready to give up on the whole business. In a hidden drawer, he found a set of small, leather-bound journals. They were his father's work logs. He opened the first not knowing what he was looking for. He expected to read about passion, about genius, about the art of stonework. But there was none of that. Instead, the pages were filled with simple, humble entries. Tuesday carved the base of Mrs. Hale's garden bench. Took 4 hours. The left corner needed rework. Thursday, a young couple brought me their grandmother's broken headstone. Not worth much, but it meant the world to them. Spent the afternoon repairing it for free. The gratitude in their eyes was good payment. Wednesday, spent all day on the archway for the town hall. My back aches, still not right. I failed to finish it today. We'll try again tomorrow. Page after page, it was the same. A simple, honest record of the work, the slow, boring, and difficult work. At the end of the first journal, his father had written a single short paragraph. A man who works only when he is inspired will be a man of many beginnings and no endings. The great pillar does not rise because it is inspired. It rises because it is built correctly, stone by stone, day by day. The work of a craftsman must be the same. You do not show up because you feel good. You show up, and in doing the work you might, if you are lucky, begin to feel good. The words hit Eli like a physical blow. He had been looking at his work all wrong. His father wasn't a master because he was always inspired. He was a master because he always showed up. He had the discipline to do the boring work day after day. That was his secret. Eli sat in the dim candlelight reading entry after entry, and for the first time he understood. Motivation was the spark, but discipline was the stone foundation. Motivation got you excited to start. Discipline got you to the finish line. He thought of all the projects he'd abandoned, the sculptures that existed only as sketches, the ideas that burned bright and died fast. He'd been chasing the feeling of starting, never the satisfaction of finishing. He closed the journal and looked at the unfinished pillar standing in the corner of his workshop. It was rough, barely begun, but it was real. It was there. And tomorrow it would still be there waiting for him. The next morning, Eli walked into his shop, and he was a different man. He didn't wait for a feeling of excitement. He didn't look at his own sketches. He walked over to the first pillar and picked up his hammer and chisel. He made a new rule for himself. He would work on the fountain for 4 hours every morning. No matter what, even if it was boring, even if he was frustrated, he would just show up and do the work. And so he did. The first few days were the hardest. His mind screamed at him to stop, to do something more interesting. One morning, he spent the entire 4 hours just smoothing a single curve on the pillar, making almost no visible progress. The old Eli would have quit in a rage. But the new Eli just calmly put his tools down at the end of the 4 hours and said to himself, "I will try again tomorrow." Slowly, a change began to happen. As he worked, he started to find a new kind of satisfaction, a quiet pride, not in a brilliant idea, but in a job well done. He began to see the beauty in the small things, the perfect angle of a carved line, the clean, smooth surface after hours of polishing, the way the stones seemed to come alive under his hands. He wasn't just building a fountain anymore. He was learning the craft of his father. He was building character. Days turned to weeks. The first pillar was completed, then the second, then the third. He no longer needed motivation to start each morning. The discipline itself became the fuel. He began to notice details he'd never seen before, the way light hit the stone differently depending on the depth of the carving, the way small imperfections could be used to add character rather than ruin a piece. After 3 long months of steady, disciplined work, he reached the 12th and final pillar. The virtue carved into it was discipline. He smiled at the irony. With careful hands, he made the final cuts. Then, slowly and methodically, he assembled the fountain in the courtyard outside his workshop. He connected the water channels his father had taught him to build years ago, but that he'd never had the patience to master. Finally, the moment came. He opened the valve. For a moment there was silence. And then water began to flow. It cascaded down the pillars, dancing around the carved virtues, catching the sunlight. The sound was the most beautiful thing Eli had ever heard. It was the sound of a promise kept. It was the sound of discipline. It was the sound of good work. The next day, the old merchant returned. Eli simply pointed to the courtyard where the fountain stood, water flowing in perfect rhythm over the 12 pillars of virtue. The old man walked over to it slowly, his eyes wide. He ran his hands over the carvings, tracing each symbol with reverence. He closed his eyes, just listening to the sound of the water for a full minute. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about this fountain," the merchant said softly, a tear rolling down his cheek. "He said it would represent everything our family stood for. You haven't just built a fountain, you've given us back our legacy." Eli understood then. The work wasn't about him or his genius. It was about service. It was about preserving something that mattered to someone else. It was about the steady, honest work that keeps the world turning. He stood in his workshop one evening, looking at the completed fountain through the window. The air felt lighter, his chest no longer heavy with the weight of unfinished dreams. He whispered to himself, not in doubt this time, but in quiet certainty, "I am not the ideas I abandoned. I am the work I chose to complete." What is the lesson we learn here today? Eli built the fountain and saved his shop. But more importantly, he built himself. He learned the most important lesson a craftsman or any person can ever learn. So what is the lesson for us? Eli's story is not just about one stonemason. It is about all of us. Because in one way or another, each of us will face the moment where motivation fades and the work gets hard. And in those moments, we are faced with the same decision Eli had to make. Do I quit when it gets boring, or do I keep showing up? The moral lessons. Number 1, motivation is the spark that starts the fire, but discipline is the fuel that keeps it burning. You need the spark to get going. That initial excitement, that burst of energy, it's important. But if you don't have discipline, you won't get very far. A fire that is all spark and no fuel will burn bright for a moment, then die in the darkness. Motivation gets you to start. Discipline gets you to finish. Learn to separate the two. When you feel motivated, use it, but don't depend on it. Build systems, create rules, show up even when you don't feel like it. That is the real power. Number 2, learn to love the process, not just the prize. Eli wanted the glory of finishing a masterpiece, but he discovered something deeper, the satisfaction of doing good work, even when no one was watching. The real reward is not finishing the project. The real reward is becoming the kind of person who can finish the project. The pride that comes from doing hard, boring work is deeper and more lasting than the fleeting excitement of a new idea. The process is where you grow. The struggle is where you become. Number 3, just show up, especially when you don't feel like it. When you're tired, when you're bored, when you're frustrated, that is when it counts the most. Those are the moments that define you. Eli spent an entire morning making almost no progress, but he didn't quit. That morning mattered more than the mornings when the work came easy. Don't worry about the whole staircase. Just focus on taking the next single step. Carve one line, write one sentence, make one phone call. That is how great things are truly built. Not by lightning, but by the steady, quiet, and unstoppable power of showing up day after day after day. Number 4, your effort is never wasted, even when it feels invisible. Every stroke of Eli's chisel, even the ones that seemed to make no difference, contributed to the final masterpiece. You may not see progress today, you may not see it this week, but the work is accumulating. The discipline is building, and one day you will look back and be amazed at how far you've come. Number 5, discipline is not punishment, it is freedom. Eli thought discipline would trap him. Instead, it set him free. Free from the anxiety of unfinished projects, free from the shame of broken promises, free from the exhaustion of chasing motivation. Discipline gives you the freedom to create the life you actually want, not just the life you daydream about. So wherever you are right now, whether you're staring at an unfinished project, struggling to stay consistent, or feeling like you'll never have what it takes, remember Eli's story. Don't wait for motivation to return. Don't keep chasing the spark. Don't mistake excitement for commitment. Because the power you're looking for is already inside you. It's called discipline, and it's been waiting for you to use it. The story is not finished. The page is not closed. And the same way Eli built his fountain, stone by stone, you can build your life. You are stronger than your excuses. You are bigger than your feelings. And your future holds more than your motivation could ever imagine. If you found this story meaningful, give us a like. Write in the comment what lesson you need most right now. Don't forget to subscribe. We will meet again.